Okay, we're back on the 1948 Pontiac Silver Streak. It's coming along quite nicely. We haven't run the engine again, we just got the water pump in, but today I want to talk about the 12-volt conversion for this car in particular and a little bit in general. So this is not a definitive guide to converting from 6 volts to 12 volts, but more of just some I've wired probably a dozen cars in the last 5 years, cars and trucks. This is the second conversion, and one of the conversions was a complete rewire. This one was rewired when it was restored probably 20 years ago. The wires are still in good shape. There was no reason to go to the expense and hassle of rewiring the whole car. So obviously you start with the battery. This is in the original place. It looks like the 6-volt battery, except it's a 12-volt, and it's a size 3EE. You can kind of see it down there, maybe on the side, but 3EE. It's 12 volt, and it's the long skinny one that's going to fit in a lot of old bigger cars, Buicks, Cadillacs. I've seen that style of battery in a lot of them. Okay, so you swap the battery. You pay attention to whether it is positive ground or negative ground. 90+% of the time when you're converting, you're going to go to negative ground regardless of what it was originally. And this is because generally you're also converting to an alternator. You could convert to a generator, but then you would have to get a 12-volt generator versus your 6-volt generator. And this car, they bought a whole kit, and I'll show you the paperwork and the stuff in a little bit, but it's a really good kit. Came with a couple of pieces that we didn't need, but for the most part it was all good stuff. So this alternator came with it. It came with a bracket on the bottom, which you can't really see, but it ended up bolting to the original generator bracket right down there. And this is a standard GM style alternator, I think a 10SI. It's wired according to the instructions. You can see in that white shrink wrap, it's got the diode. I got a big fat flexible ground strap. Got a big battery cable, positive battery cable that goes down to the starter. Okay, so you got your battery, you have your charging device, whether it's an alternator or a generator. And this one is internally regulated. Generators are generally externally regulated, so pay attention to all that. And if you're buying a kit, it should all come together. So you'll notice that black box right there is the old regulator, and there's nothing hooked to it underneath. So sorry for the shadows, I'm holding the light and the camera myself. Okay, so no need for regulator. And then while we're here, we'll go to the ignition. This was a point system. They converted it to a Pertronics, which I think it came with the conversion kit, so it's kind of cool, all came together. That was done, it's internal. The wires are run up. There's the coil. It's a modern 12-volt coil, came with the Pertronics system. I just turned the words to the back, no need to show them off. That's the original spot for the original coil. It was way up there. The spark plug wires stay the same. And like I said, I didn't disturb the rest of the wiring. And while we're right here, underneath there is a horn relay. Relays are sensitive to voltage. I don't know if you can read that one, but it says 12 volt right on the side of it. And this kit came, it was in the original spot that the original 6-volt horn relay was in. So all I did was make sure the wires hit the right spot, swap the relays, horn works. Okay, so this particular kit, you're gonna go upside down for a minute. I hope you can see, but all those wires are going to a mega fuse. So the main thing we're protecting with the mega fuse, I don't think you can see anything. Anyway, there's a bunch of wires. The mega fuse protects the alternator. If you get a short under the dash, going to a light, going to wherever, and it gets a dead short, it'll blow that fuse and save the alternator. And so to protect the rest of the car, in this bundle here, I put a circuit breaker. It's wrapped up in friction tape, but that's a circuit breaker, and so if that blows, it'll reset itself, and that is the main feed to the car, so that'll protect everything else. If it starts blowing, something is over amping, which more than likely it's the headlights. So with that, we'll move on to lights. All light bulbs are definitely voltage sensitive, and so when you're thinking about light bulbs, everybody knows you got headlights, we got front marker lights both sides, we got tail lights. Old cars like this don't have reverse lights, but you have to pay attention to all the little stuff that you might not think about, because not only do we have tail lights, which are, after they're converted, they take an 1157 real standard bulb, but there in the top of that trunk handle is a license plate light, and so it mounts from inside the trunk. You have to pay attention to what it is. This kit was real good. It came with a page of all the common conversions from 6-volt style bulbs to a 12-volt style and what numbers to look for. Occasionally you might find a light inside of the trunk, but most of your lights that you're going to lose or not be able to find easy are going to be on the interior. So just things to watch for is dome light, which is a lot of old cars have, and then variety of lights. And looking at this, it's hard to see where would the lights be. Okay, here's a clock and there's a light bulb in it. Get your light. See, so there's a light bulb right there in the back of the clock. It's attached to the dash lights, so when you turn the headlights on, it turns all the dash lights on. Well, what about the clock? We'll talk about the clock in a minute. So up under here, there's a little courtesy light. It runs off of this switch. Sometimes there's even other lights that are wired in with the dome light that are up under here. This car does not have them. And so then on the dash panel, there's a light in the back of the radio, which I changed the bulb, but it's, you got to reach up in there, get it, change the bulb, and pull it back out. These I have not put the bulbs in yet, but I've got them ready when I put the gauge panel back in. So that hanging right there in close-up, that's a light socket. Okay, now without getting into a lot of electrical stuff, your switches are almost certainly going to be okay. 6-volt switches are designed to handle the amps in a 6-volt system. When you change to a 12-volt system, you basically double the voltage and half the amps. There's more stuff to it with resistor loads and everything else, but that's the general rule. So your switches are, if they're in good shape, which these were working, are in fine shape to be switched over to 12 volt. So ignition switch, light switch, there's a fog light switch down there, which there are no fog lights on this car, but it's wired in. And then this right hand white switch here, see the glare, that's for the heater. Okay, the heater is a high amperage situation, so they sent a special resistor to take it from 12 volts down to 6 volts, and it's a ceramic style heater, and it's mounted underneath there. You see that little silver bracket on the bottom? Looks kind of like a upside down P shape. That's holding the deal. So the wire's coming out of the switch at 12 volts through that resistor and then out to the heater motor at 6 volts, so it won't burn up the heater motor. Motors, depending on which motor we're talking about, the accepted practice is that starter motors are fine. A 6 volt starter motor is fine because it's very intermittent usage. You just want to be careful about how long you crank it and how often you use it, and know that it's going to go out eventually, and you can get 12 volt converted starter motors. The radio should run on a knockdown resistor. This one's not hooked up. It wasn't working before, and the owner said not to worry about it. It's just old. It's just for looks. This is more of a parade car and Sunday go to meeting car. Clocks, according to everything I've researched, have to be converted internally. The way I understand how the clocks work, they have a constant power source, and there's like a tiny relay inside. When the watch spring goes down to a certain point, it cranks up, winds the clock completely up, and then turns itself off so that it doesn't drain the battery down. And that relay needs to be 6 volts. Everything needs to be 6 volts. There's the little motor in there, and I don't know why, but everything I read online said you cannot just put 6 volts through you can't get like a reducer and reduce it down to 6 volts. I don't know why. So for now, it's unhooked. It just won't work. Now to the gauge panel, which I've still got out of the car. This fancy little gadget. We got some good light back here. So this fancy little gadget here, where my fingers are, it's got the electronics all in potting, and it's got the aluminum housing for its heat sink. So this appears to be a really well made deal. Here is the information. I don't know if you can read it, but I'll read it out to you. It's vintageautogarage.com, phone number 800-516-4461. The owner of this car purchased this, and this is part of the whole kit. It's a very complete kit, good instructions, and you can see kind of inside there, this little 5-pin connector is where you put all your wires in. And so the first one is 12 volts in. That's where you're going to your power from, whether it's your ignition switch or your fuse box or whatever, for your gauges would go in here. And then the second one is a ground, and so I've got a ground hooked up, and I hook it up both to the housing of the fuse panel, and it will go to the other end. I'll hook it to the body of the car underneath the dash somewhere. That's why I just left it long for now. The third, fourth, and fifth ones are 6.7 volts out, so it'll carry at least 3 gauges. I'm sure you could double up if you needed to, but I've got the fuel gauge here and the water temperature gauge over here, and that's all we've got. So we've got a blank hole if we need to run something else. I thought about trying the clock on it, but I don't want to mess the clock up. Not my car, and they're okay with it not working. So this is where the speedometer cable goes. This has got a mechanical oil pressure, and then underneath there you'll see 2 posts. This outside one is for the mount, but those other 2 posts in there are for the ammeter. Accepted practice by most people is to just delete the ammeter. If you're worried about seeing what your battery's doing, install a separate voltmeter, and I'll leave you to do your own research. There's a lot of argument on the internet whether you can use it or not. For the sake of safety, I don't want all the power going through this 73-year-old gauge. If it blows out, burns the car down, just not a good thing. That's where I defaulted, was to safety side. So the ammeter will not be hooked up at all. I'll put this in a minute. Those 2 lights that I showed you earlier, those bulb holders, they go here. That's for illumination of the gauge panel. Later cars are going to have a lot more. They're going to be scattered. They're going to be in the radio. They're going to be in the glove box. They're going to be here and there. So just watch for all your interior lights, because the 12 volt will blow up a 6 volt bulb. I mean, it'll just burn it out, but then it'll be dark and you won't know what's going on. The center hole is for the high beam indicator, which is really cool on this car, and I'll show you why. Put a flashlight in the back of this. Let's see if I can get over here without a glare. And my flashlight's not bright enough. I'm gonna go see if I can get another flash. Okay, all you Pontiac people will recognize that little indent chief sign. I'm trying to cover up the glare with my thumb. You see, it's lit up in red. And that is the high beam indicator. On, off, on, off. Pretty cool. Gauges are not in the best of shape, but this is an older restoration, and who knows what it would cost to get these letters re-screen printed on the back of the glass. It's just sometimes it's a mess, and we just have to pick a place to stop when you're working on these cars. So I think covered just about everything. The horns will take the 12 volt, kind of like the starter motor. They are loud. I'll show you next time we do a engine running video, which will probably be tomorrow. But they're loud and obnoxious, and that's partially because you're throwing 12 volts at a 6 volt horn, but they were probably loud anyway. And they won't last forever, but if you stay off of them, don't just buzz the coils up, they'll be fine. I don't see anything else we need to talk about. This car does not have electric wipers. That would be a separate resistor, or getting a 12 volt motor would be better, period. This one's got vacuum wipers. I don't know if they work, and probably not, but doesn't matter. So that's the ins and outs on this car. We've already tested all the lights. I don't have the battery hooked up right now. We'll do a quick walkthrough later when we do all the final walk around. I'll show you all the lights. It's a cool old car. I'll be back probably running tomorrow. We got new water pump, carbs rebuilt. We got air cleaner and stuff to show you. We'll show you all that in the next video. Alright, thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. If you like what Offbeat Motors is doing, we sure enjoy working with them on some of these old car things. And y'all take it easy, get an old car, get it out on the road, enjoy.